There comes a moment in life when the noise around you becomes louder than your own breath. Opinions pile up, expectations grow heavier, people want explanations, performances, compliance. And if you've lived long enough, you realize something quietly powerful. You don't owe your remaining energy to everyone who demands it. In old age, something sacred begins to happen if you allow it. You start to see life not as a stage, but as a home, and homes don't need applause, they need peace. There is a quiet shift that happens as we grow older, and it doesn't announce itself with noise or drama. It arrives gently, often after disappointment, loss, or exhaustion. One day you wake up and realize you don't want to fight every battle anymore, not because you're weak, but because you finally understand your worth. For much of life, we are taught to explain ourselves, to justify our choices, to prove that we are good enough, kind enough, productive enough. We learn to stay loud so we won't be ignored, to stay available so we won't be abandoned. But aging has a way of peeling back those layers and asking a braver question. What if you no longer needed permission to be at peace? In old age, focusing on yourself is not selfish. It is an act of courage. It means turning inward and asking, what do I need now to live with dignity? It means recognizing that your energy is finite and precious. You begin to understand that not every relationship deserves access to your inner world, and not every opinion deserves a response. Silence at this stage becomes a form of wisdom. Silence is not avoidance, it is restraint. It is knowing when speaking will cost you more than it gives. When you stay silent, you are not shrinking, you are choosing yourself. You are protecting the parts of you that have carried too much for too long. There is also a deep vulnerability in letting go of being understood. Many of us spend years trying to control how others see us. Aging teaches us something radical. Being misunderstood is survivable. In fact, it can be freeing. When you stop correcting every false narrative, you reclaim your time, your breath, your calm. Focusing on yourself means setting boundaries without guilt. It means resting without explaining. It means no longer bending your truth to keep others comfortable. This kind of self-focus is not loud or flashy. It is quiet, steady, and deeply grounded. As we age, we learn that strength doesn't always look like persistence. Sometimes it looks like letting go, like choosing peace over proving a point, like walking away from conversations that drain your spirit. This is emotional maturity. This is resilience shaped by experience. There is grief in this process too. Grief for the years you spent overgiving, for the times you stayed silent when you should have spoken, and spoke when silence would have saved you. But there is also grace. Grace in forgiving yourself, grace in allowing life to be simpler now. Old age invites us to live more honestly, to stop performing, to stop chasing validation, to be present in our own lives. And when you accept that invitation, something powerful happens. You become rooted. Calm, unshakable. You don't need to be louder to matter. You don't need to explain your healing. Your peace is proof enough. And if the world doesn't understand your silence, that's okay. Some wisdom is meant to be lived, not explained. As the years pass, something inside us begins to soften and sharpen at the same time. We soften toward ourselves, and we sharpen our sense of what truly matters. There is less tolerance for noise, less appetite for drama, and far more respect for the quiet spaces where truth lives. Aging doesn't make us invisible, it makes us intentional. For a long time, many of us lived in reaction mode. We reacted to expectations, to criticism, to the fear of disappointing others. We learned to stay engaged even when we were exhausted, to stay available even when it cost us our well-being. But with age comes a powerful realization. Constantly explaining yourself is a form of self-abandonment. Focusing on yourself in later life is about reclaiming that abandoned ground. It's about listening closely to your inner voice, the one that has been whispering all along, asking for rest, honesty, and respect. This kind of self-focus isn't about isolation, it's about alignment. When your inner values and outer actions finally meet, life becomes quieter and clearer. Silence plays a crucial role in this season, not the silence of fear, but the silence of discernment. You learn that you don't need to respond to every provocation or correct every misunderstanding. Some conversations are not meant to be resolved, they are meant to be released. Silence becomes a boundary, and boundaries are how we care for ourselves. There is a vulnerability in choosing not to explain. It means accepting that some people will never fully understand your choices, your growth, or your limits, but aging teaches us that being understood is not a requirement for living a meaningful life. Integrity is, peace is. As we grow older, our bodies and hearts carry stories. Some of those stories are heavy: loss, regret, disappointment. They leave marks, but they also offer wisdom. They teach us that time is not something to waste on proving our worth. Our worth was never up for debate. Focusing on yourself means tending to your emotional health with the same seriousness you give to your physical health. It means asking yourself hard, honest questions and being brave enough to listen to the answers. It means letting go of roles that no longer fit and relationships that only survive on your sacrifice. There is strength in choosing less explanation, less obligation, less emotional labor. This simplicity is not emptiness, it is freedom. It creates space for joy, curiosity, and genuine connection. Aging invites us into a deeper relationship with ourselves, one based not on performance, but on presence, not on approval, but on self-trust. When you live this way, your silence speaks volumes. It tells the world that you know who you are and what you stand for. You don't need to announce your boundaries. You don't need to justify your quiet. Your life lived with honesty and care becomes your statement, and in that stillness there is profound courage, because choosing yourself, especially after a lifetime of giving, is one of the bravest things you will ever do. There is a certain clarity that only time can give you. It doesn't arrive all at once, and it doesn't come from success or failure alone. It comes from living, from loving, from losing, and from carrying more than you thought you could. As we grow older, that clarity begins to ask us to live differently, not louder, but truer. For much of our lives, we are rewarded for being everything to everyone. We learn to show up, to explain ourselves, to keep the peace even when it costs us our voice. We learn that being needed feels a lot like being valued. But age has a way of revealing the truth. Being constantly available is not the same as being deeply connected. In later years, focusing on yourself becomes less about improvement and more about preservation. Preservation of your energy, preservation of your emotional health, preservation of your dignity. You start to understand that your time is no longer something to spend carelessly, it is something to honor. Silence becomes a powerful companion in this season, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned that words carry weight. You choose them carefully now. You understand that not every situation deserves your reaction, and not every person deserves access to your inner world. Silence becomes a way of staying grounded when the world tries to pull you into chaos. There is vulnerability in stepping back, in not explaining your decisions, in letting people draw their own conclusions. But vulnerability is not about exposure, it is about truth, and the truth is you no longer need external validation to trust yourself. That trust has been built through years of experience, reflection, and survival. Aging also teaches us about grief. Grief for the version of ourselves that tried so hard to be enough. Grief for the relationships that required self. Betrayal to survive, and yet within that grief is compassion. Compassion for who you were and respect for who you are becoming. Focusing on yourself means setting boundaries that may disappoint others. It means choosing rest without guilt and solitude without shame. It means allowing your life to be simpler, slower, and more intentional. This is not giving up. This is growing up emotionally. There is a quiet strength in no longer needing to prove your worth, in understanding that your value is not measured by productivity, approval, or sacrifice. Your presence alone carries meaning. As the years go by, you begin to recognize that peace is not something you find after fixing everything. It is something you choose by letting go of what you can no longer carry. Silence helps you do that. It creates space to listen to yourself, to your body, to your truth. And in that space, something remarkable happens. You become more rooted, more authentic, less afraid of being misunderstood. You realize that living well is not about being seen by everyone, but about being honest with yourself. That kind of life doesn't need noise to prove its worth. There is a moment in life when striving gives way to settling, not settling for less, but settling into yourself. It's a moment that often comes with age, when you realize that the constant effort to be understood, approved of, and validated has quietly worn you down. And in that realization, something courageous begins to grow. For years, many of us believed that staying engaged meant staying loud, that showing up required explanation, defense, and emotional labor. We learned to smooth things over, to carry other people's discomfort, to keep relationships alive by sacrificing our own needs. But time has a way of revealing what is sustainable and what is not. Aging asks us to choose sustainability. Focusing on yourself in this season is not an act of withdrawal from the world. It is a return to integrity. It means aligning your actions with your values instead of with expectations. It means noticing when your body tightens in certain conversations, when your heart feels heavy in certain spaces, and honoring those signals rather than overriding them. Silence becomes a trusted ally here, not the silence of fear or avoidance, but the silence that comes from self-trust. You learn that you don't need to respond immediately or at all, that clarity often comes when you pause. Silence allows you to observe patterns instead of getting caught in them. It creates room for discernment. There is vulnerability in letting others be disappointed, in not explaining your choices, in stepping away from roles that once defined you. But vulnerability is not about pleasing others. It is about telling the truth with your life. And sometimes the truest thing you can say is nothing. With age comes a deeper understanding of boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors with locks. You decide who gets access and when. This kind of self-focus is not about isolation. It is about connection that doesn't require self-betrayal. There is also grief in this transition. Grief for the years spent proving your worth, grief for the times you ignored your own needs to keep the peace, but there is also compassion, compassion for the younger version of you who did the best they could with what they knew. Aging offers a quieter definition of strength. Strength looks like choosing rest over resentment, like letting go of arguments you could win but don't want to carry, like trusting yourself enough to stop explaining. When you focus on yourself, you begin to live with more presence and less performance. You show up fully, but not everywhere. You speak when it matters, and you stay silent when silence protects your peace. And in that stillness, you discover something powerful. Your life does not need to be loud to be meaningful. Your calm becomes your legacy. Your integrity becomes your voice. And the world may not always understand your quiet, but you will. And that understanding is enough. As life unfolds and the years add up, we begin to recognize a truth that once felt uncomfortable. Not everything requires our participation. Not every conflict needs our voice. Not every relationship deserves the same level of access. This realization doesn't come from indifference. It comes from wisdom earned through experience. For much of our lives, we are conditioned to stay engaged at all costs. We're taught that being responsive means being responsible, that caring means overextending, that love is proven through constant availability, but aging slowly dismantles those beliefs. It teaches us that constant engagement can quietly erode our sense of self. Focusing on yourself in later life is about choosing intention over obligation. It is about asking what truly aligns with who I am now, rather than what will keep everyone else comfortable. This shift can feel unsettling at first, especially if your identity was built around being needed. But it is also deeply liberating. Silence becomes one of the most powerful tools in this season. Silence gives you space to respond instead of react. It allows emotions to settle and truths to surface. When you stop filling every gap with words, you begin to hear yourself more clearly. You notice what drains you and what restores you. There is vulnerability in choosing not to explain your decisions, in allowing others to misunderstand you. But aging teaches us that clarity within yourself matters more than clarity in the eyes of others. You learn that you can live a full, meaningful life without being fully understood. As the years go on, you start to value emotional safety over emotional intensity. You gravitate toward conversations that feel grounded, relationships that feel reciprocal, and environments that feel calm. This is not narrowing your world, it is refining it. Focusing on yourself also means honoring your limits. It means recognizing that exhaustion is not a badge of honor, that rest is not something you earn after proving your worth. It is something you deserve simply because you are human. This understanding transforms how you care for yourself and others. There is also grief in this refinement, grief for the parts of you that were shaped by people pleasing, grief for the time spent ignoring your own needs. But there is tenderness here too. Tenderness toward the version of you who survived by staying agreeable, by staying quiet, by staying strong. With age, strength begins to look different. It looks like saying no without guilt, like walking away without anger, like staying silent without fear. This kind of strength is rooted, calm, and deeply embodied. When you focus on yourself, your life becomes less about performance and more about presence. You show up authentically without forcing connection or approval, and in that authenticity you find peace. Your silence becomes a statement, your boundaries become a form of care, and your self-focus becomes a quiet declaration that you matter, not because of what you give, but because of who you are. There is a gentle reckoning that comes with time, not the kind that demands answers, but the kind that asks for honesty. As the years move forward, life begins to invite us into a quieter, more intentional way of being, not because we have less to offer, but because we finally understand what is worth offering and what is not. For a long time, many of us measured our value by how much we carried, how much we fixed, how much we endured without complaint. We learned to equate love with sacrifice and belonging with self-erasure. But aging has a way of interrupting that pattern and asking a braver question. What would it look like to stay whole? Focusing on yourself in this stage of life is an act of integrity. It means listening to the signals your body sends instead of overriding them. It means paying attention to emotional fatigue and honoring it rather than pushing through. This kind of self-focus is not about turning away from others. It is about turning toward truth. Silence becomes meaningful here, not as withdrawal, but as wisdom. You begin to understand that words can either build bridges or drain you, and you learn that some bridges don't need rebuilding. Silence gives you the space to observe, to breathe, and to choose your response with care. There is vulnerability in stepping out of old roles, in no longer being the one who smooths things over, who explains everything, who carries the emotional weight of the room. Letting go of these roles can feel risky because they once kept you safe. But vulnerability is not about staying small. It is about staying honest. As you age, your relationship with boundaries deepens. You realize that boundaries are not punishments, they are protections. They allow you to show up fully without losing yourself. They make room for relationships rooted in mutual respect rather than obligation. There is also grief in this clarity. Grief for the years spent proving your worth. Grief for the moments you ignored your own needs to meet someone else's expectations. But there is compassion too, compassion for the version of you who did what they had to do to belong. With time, you begin to redefine strength. Strength is no longer about endurance at all costs. It is about discernment, about knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, about choosing peace without guilt. Focusing on yourself leads to a life that is slower but richer, quieter but more grounded. You stop chasing approval and start cultivating self-trust. You learn that you don't need to explain your healing or justify your calm. Your silence becomes a reflection of your self-respect. Your choices become aligned with your values. And in this alignment, you find something deeply sustaining, the freedom to live as you are without apology and without noise. Because in old age, the bravest thing you can do is this: choose yourself without apology and let the world adjust to your calm.